This episode has been brought to you by the Raw Spirit Team. Building a business can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. We teach small and medium-sized businesses strategies for building a profitable, successful, stress-free business and life. Because guess what? You are more than your business. Through one-on-one training, online courses, and monthly guest experts, the Spirit Team is built on the principle of building each other up in business and in spirit. Try it for 14 days for free. Just head to rawrawconsulting.com and check out the Raw Spirit Team. Hey, it's Lauren, and welcome to the Raw podcast. On the show today, I spoke with Kelly Ramsdell, and we talked about all things decluttering. You know, during our conversation, I loved how Kelly really made it clear that, you don't need to hold on to things that no longer serve you. And she talked about the benefit of decluttering your space and your life. She really made the connection between, having too many things in your home and self-limiting beliefs, and really just gave practical advice, tips and tricks, and really well thought out comments on essentially how to empower yourself through decluttering. We also talked about what to do with sentimental items. We talked about what to do with gifts people give you that no longer serve you. And we talked about the importance of just honoring what's right for you and coming up with a process that suits you in your life and not necessarily somebody else's. So it's a super interesting conversation. I was engaged the entire time, and I know you will definitely get something out of it. All right, it's time for the episode. All right, I'm Lauren, and welcome to the show. My guest today is Kelly Ramsdell. She's the founder and CEO of Actually I Can. Kelly's passion is helping other women find their way back to themselves through self-care, creativity, and adventure. I have asked Kelly to join me today to talk about decluttering, minimalism. Do you have to be a minimalist to declutter? And we're also going to be talking about how decluttering can invite abundance into your life, because I know everyone loves to talk about abundance. Kelly, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So I know that, you do a lot of work in this space of decluttering, and I would love to know, a little bit about your story. I think you weren't always into that kind of work. Can you tell me sort of about your transition into that line of work and why decluttering?
Yes, I can. And I definitely wasn't always into that line of work, both professionally, because once upon a time I was an attorney, and also personally, because once upon a time I was in my former house where I had raised my two children. I was in my second marriage at the time, desperately unhappy, living with two autoimmune conditions, and everything piled up and was a total mess. So I had room for all of the artwork that the kids brought home from school, and that all got shoved into closets, right? And I wasn't necessarily weeding out clothing and everything else. So I ended up in kind of a very cluttered space, like the type, not hoarding level clutter, but cluttered enough that like I wouldn't have wanted somebody to come look in my bedroom, because not only was there stuff like on the nightstand, but there were like piles of things I needed to go through sort of stacked around the room. And so one of the things I did, I decluttered that marriage. So we'll go with that.
I actually was going to ask you, is decluttering only things, or is it people too and jobs?
It can be people, it can be jobs, it can be negative self-talk. That's one of the things that I'm working on a program for. Like, it can be outdated beliefs, because a lot of people have a belief that they are the way they are. So like in families, we have a lot of familial roles that are assigned to us sometimes, even when we're kids, before we even get a say. Oh, she's the clumsy one, or oh, she's the smart one. She's she's the one who has the good head for business, and you're the one who doesn't have the head for money. And
Right.
we take those beliefs on ourselves, and
Yeah.
most of those are not, first of all, they're not really our belief, but we take them on.
Yeah.
And so we can declutter that stuff too. So you can declutter. So when I say decluttering, I'm into decluttering it all
Yeah, I
nowadays.
love that. I love that because, I think that you're right. We take on these, a lot of people like to label them as self-limiting beliefs, and they're things that, you're right, were maybe suggested to us at one time when we were 5, that, for some reason we just decided that was a truth for us. And, that's kind of been, part of the way that we've grown into who we are, right? That we kind of play that role, so to speak.
Sure. We take it on before we have the intellectual ability to really assess it. And
Yeah.
then we use that to define ourselves for like decades. And if we're
Yeah.
not careful, we take that to the grave.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that a lot of that comes down to self-awareness? Because sometimes people might be running these patterns or living these lives, or, thinking that this is just the way that it is, but maybe they're not self-aware that they have the power to change.
I think it's definitely that. And I think
Yeah.
that one of the things is that people don't realize that they can interrupt those patterns. I mean, they are patterns in their scripts. Like we all know, like, oh, I have a girlfriend who always fights with one of her 2 sisters, right? And
Right.
that's one of the ways she defines herself. Well, we always fight. But
Right.
they don't have to always fight. Like just because you're invited to an argument doesn't mean you have to go, so
It takes 2 people to argue. Yeah.
so there's like things that you could do there. And I mean, and some of them, some things that you can do are major. Like, we're all one decision away from being very dangerous people, because we could just decide that we're gonna up and move to another country. We can decide that we're going to like stop whatever this job is and go try something else. We can decide to walk out of our family if we want to.
Yeah.
And that's
Free
people
will.
do. Yeah, it's free will, and people do it, but there's just a lot of pressure to not do that. But I think like most of our decisions are much smaller than those ones.
Yeah.
And decluttering though is a way to do it, because it's an incremental change, and it can be small changes that incrementally help you along your way. And so that's one of the things that I like about decluttering as a methodology, whether we're talking about decluttering your wardrobe, decluttering your house, working on decluttering negative self-talk, which
Yeah.
would just be like interrupting yourself when you catch yourself saying, oh God, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that. You can just say, wait a minute, I'm not actually stupid, I made a mistake. You can change that. And if every time you default to I'm so stupid, you say, no, I'm not stupid, I'm smart, I just made a mistake. And if you continue to do that enough times, eventually that first script stops running. And
Yeah.
it's just, it gives you freedom, and you're giving yourself a gift of grace, because basically you're just like, yeah, I wouldn't tell somebody else they were stupid because they did this. I would just say you made a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny, how we would never talk to our best friends or our loved ones in the ways that we talk to ourselves. And, the constant mind chatter and the constant, obsessiveness with one thought or putting ourselves down. It's so difficult to sometimes recognize that you have a role in allowing that to continue on. Where did you
Yeah.
first learn about that? Because I first learned about that probably going back almost 20 years now. But, most recently when I read Eckhart Tolle's work, all about being in the power of the, in the moment. And that really shifted a lot of that narrative for me as well, about, recognizing that our thoughts are really detrimental to, they take us away from where we are, which is our present moment of power, where we can declutter. So where did you first learn about, these things? What was your journey with that?
You know what? You were starting to ask, and I was like, crud, what was that book? And I don't remember the name. I know I have read some of Eckhart Tolle's stuff. I know that I have read some of Gary Zukav's stuff,
Yeah.
The Seat of the Soul and
Seed of
stuff
the
like that.
soul.
And I think though some of it came from some of the other books, in pieces. So like Liz
Yeah.
Gilbert's Big Magic is something that talks about that a little bit. That's not the point of that book, but it's touched on. And I think what happened is that intrigued me. And I realized, at that point in time, I'm like, well, heck, I'm kind of in an abusive relationship inside my own head, right? Because of the negative self-talk. So I was working on trying to turn that around. And so that's another thing that you can declutter. But
Yeah.
I would encourage everyone to do what they can to try to turn that around and be just a little, not a little, be a lot more loving and kind to yourself, because it's kind of
Yeah.
a huge thing. And for me, I got into it after I was already doing the physical decluttering work.
Right.
And I know that this is just on audio, but if you were to see behind me, you could see that I have wall-to-wall bookcases behind me, and they are full of books and other objects, and I'm not living a minimalist life by any
No,
stretch.
you're not.
No, but I do kind of drool over some of the minimalist photos and stuff that you see.
Yes, but it's
in
not always
magazines and
realistic
online.
necessarily.
But it's not, I tried paring way down, and I found that was not cozy for me. I'm a person who's about putting down roots and feeling settled and everything else. And that comes from an itinerant life as a child. So I really like the idea of place and of things developing over time and having that sort of sense about it. So
Yeah.
I'm not into minimalism, although I admire it.
Yeah.
But I did get into a lot of my positive self-awareness and self-talk and self-expression and self-compassion. Like all of that kind of grew out of decluttering stuff. Because as you
Yeah.
do that, you have to ask yourself, like, what's important to me?
Yes.
What I want to lead? What is important to me? What is important to bring into that life as I'm going forward? And what is important for me to let go?
One of the things, that came to mind when you were talking about that is that people do define themselves very often, I feel, by the amount of stuff that they have. And I like that, you made the comparison with recognizing that when you are decluttering the things around you, it's almost as though you can't hide behind that anymore. And then that's when you need to get to that next level or the next layer of, oh, wait a minute, I have negative self-talk. Oh, wait a minute, I don't love my job. Oh, wait a minute, I'm surrounding myself by my childhood friends for the last 30 years, which are the most negative people I've ever met, right?
Exactly.
That's kind of the thing that, yeah.
Right. And it goes into, it can go into body image issues. Like I'm surrounding myself with these, personally right now, I'm in the US. I am probably a US size 12, which is a women's large.
Yeah.
If you're surrounding yourself with your size 6 and 8 clothes that you outgrew, every time you open those drawers or you open that closet, you are telling yourself that you are a failure or you're a less than, or that, the real you or the good you is this smaller size person. And it feeds into negative scripts that we tell ourselves. And it's the same thing if you've lost weight. Like say I was still the same size I am now, but I used to be a size 22 and I was keeping those clothes.
Yeah.
Then I would be telling myself that I don't trust myself to be able to live life where I am now. And so I think that sometimes our things can get in our way that way. Or, if we've got a collection of things that was one time you said that you liked owls, and so now your entire family gives you owl things for all of your birthdays and any holidays, and now you've got a house full of owls, and you're just like, well, I just meant that I thought they were cute.
Oh my
Like,
God. That happened to me with pigs. And I had a whole birthday one time when I was 15 where everyone gave me pig everything. I'm talking a pig slippers, a bathrobe, earrings, ornaments. And I went, exactly what you just said. I just liked them. They're not my favorite animal or anything. What's up with this?
Yeah, I didn't mean I wanted to live my entire life as the pig lady or the owl lady or whatever it happens to be, right? And you're just like, it can be hard because people gave those things to you. This is the other thing that comes up in decluttering is like, well, it was a gift, and so I don't want them to feel bad that I didn't keep their thing.
Right.
Right. So, but decluttering, like, it helps you to work through all of that. And I have found, that coaching through the process is like really kind of a key thing for me, because it gets you into deeper levels where you really do assess, like, okay, well, when I see myself in the future, what do I see? Like, who do I want to be? What do I want that life to look like? Does this collection of pigs help me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if the answer is, well, actually, they're a good starting point for me because I want to, fill in the blank, then that's fine. And if the answer is, well, actually, the only thing I really like are those pig slippers because they're comfy and they're cute, then maybe it's time to release some of that other stuff so that you have space now to welcome in the things that you really want. Like, if your dream life is not a pig bathrobe, but a beautiful caftan that you've got visions of yourself with your beautiful tie-dye caftan or whatever it happens to be, well, odds are that you only want one bathrobe. So you are holding on to the pig bathrobe. You're not making space to let that other thing that you really want, that feels like you, that gives you that vibe that you're looking for, that makes you feel like fully yourself, like you've really stepped up and you're embracing your whole being that way. And it sounds silly that it can be something like a bathrobe, but it can be a bathrobe. It can be a pair of slippers. It could be it could be a picture on your wall. It can be pretty much anything.
Yeah, I started consciously embracing the concept a couple years ago about acting as if, which is exactly what you've said. I see the woman that I want to be, and so I'm making the decisions that support growing into that. So, for example, like a long coat that I bought, last year. I bought that because I knew that she would wear that, and so I started wearing that. It sounds hilarious to talk about, but it's so true. And I'm clear on my why, I guess. And so would you say that being clear on your purpose for why you have these things is super critical?
It definitely is, but it also is hard to get to. And so what happens with a lot of people is they look around their house and they're just like, yeah, I should declutter. And they don't have a game plan, and they don't have a policy, which is something I think people really need. So before they even start, which is not the same thing as your why. Okay. It's not all of that. It's not the, what's my future look like and does this fit? But having a decluttering policy for like what you're going to do before you touch anything. And the reason I think it's important is because otherwise you get started, you get overwhelmed, you get flummoxed, and you walk away.
Yes.
And people do this time and time again, to the point that, like, I had, before I figured out my own system, I had started to declutter a few times. When I finally started working into like a thoughtful system of how I wanted to do it and coming up with a policy first, and I had an end goal. I had been divorced. I was still living in the old house, but I was dating the man I am now married to. I was going to be moving in with him, and we were going to be downsizing. And that was like a really valid goal. And that was like the new life, the future life that I was going to move into.
Right.
So I had that motivation, but I knew I needed a policy, because how do you decide when I had a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath house that had a living room, dining room, eat-in kitchen, and a family room, plus
Wow.
a garage and a basement. And the basement had a playroom for the kids and some storage area. I mean, like, we are talking a lot of space, and an attic
Yeah.
full of stuff. And
Yeah.
what it was full of was like all the stuff I mentioned earlier, but it was also full of bags of stuff that I had started to declutter and then not gotten rid of.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I had hit overwhelm. I started it, got overwhelmed, and just shoved those bags in the garage, and they were still there because they don't magically go away.
They don't?
Turns out that the gnomes don't come and take them. So yeah, so I found that having a policy when you start is super key. And the one that I had was something needed to be, it had to bring beauty or purpose or usefulness into my life, or it was no good.
Yeah, I love that. So that's kind of like the filter system that you put everything through.
Put everything through. So
Yeah.
and your policy doesn't have to be that. One
Yeah.
of the women I coached who went through my decluttering course, she had a theme as opposed to a policy, but her theme was comfort and joy.
Yeah.
So she was setting up her house to give her the feelings of comfort and joy. And if it didn't support comfort and joy for her, then it was a no-go.
Yeah. For me, I do I love it? Do I need it? And I've moved around a lot, so that's been helpful with decluttering. And a lot of the homes I've lived in have no storage, so that's been helpful. But that's the filter system that I put it through.
Yeah. But that's good, because but so many people start decluttering and they don't even have that basic formula of like, how do I
Yeah.
make a decision? And if you don't know ahead of time, like, what criteria you're using to make your decisions, you're going to hit overwhelm in no time.
Yes, I like that. So are you, sort of supportive of people coming up with their own policy or their own filter system?
100%.
Yeah, because what's for you is not for me.
Correct. It has to be what works for you. So,
Yeah.
what works for you is, things that have strong family sentiment, right? If that is one of your criteria, well, okay, then you might end up keeping things that, I wouldn't have kept,
Yeah.
right? But it's your house. It's
Yeah,
your life.
exactly.
This is how you want to live. So
Yeah.
absolutely, I really encourage people to come up with just their own policy, but to have that policy before you start, and to
Yeah.
build your decision-making muscle with as you go. So have you read the Marie Kondo book, The Lifestyle?
No, but I watched the Netflix show. Does that count?
Yes, her book was The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and the show was called Tidying Up.
Yeah.
And she's adorable. Oh my God, she's so adorable. In her book and in her show, the last thing that she has people get to is sentimental things, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
And the reason is you have developed your decision-making muscle before you get there. Because if you start there, you're going to go straight into overwhelm. There's just no way to avoid it, because it pulls on your heartstrings so much. So like, if you decide to start, if you're a parent, for instance, and you decide to start decluttering with baby photos, game over, you're done.
Yeah.
Because you sit for now you've lost 3 hours looking through the baby pictures, and you're not going to be able to, function really, and you're going to be sort of sentimental and like, oh, I missed that little baby, and the next thing you know, you're just done
Yeah.
for the day. Time's up. I used all my time and I'm fried, and this stinks, and I just don't want to do it anymore, is where most people end up. So
yeah. Yeah. So I want to go back for a minute, Kelly, to your comments about, when people give you things that you hold on to. And I guess that kind of sits within the same vein as sentimental, things. So I just felt that a listener at home is probably going, I have that issue all the time where I've collected all these things that people have given me. So how do you get rid of the guilt around that? And what's kind of the proper process, do you feel, if somebody's put something through their filters and they've gone, no, I don't love it, I don't need it, or it doesn't give me joy and comfort, or whatever the case may be? How do you kind of encourage them or inspire them to feel okay with offloading these
Well,
things?
yeah, there's a couple things. For one, and this was something that I think I actually got from reading Marie Kondo's book. Now, her book, back when I came up with my own policy and formulation and what worked for me, and started the beginnings of what became the Declutter course, her book hadn't been published yet. It came out like 6 months after I was done.
Of course.
Of
Yes.
course. And
Yes.
and actually I'm just as glad, because I think that her way of pull out every single piece of clothing that you own into one big pile, including all of your shoes and your accessories, is too overwhelming for most people. But putting that part aside for now, one of the things she said in the book was, you have to think, if it's a gift, this gets back to gifts. If it was a gift, you have to assume that the person wanted to give you something because they wanted to give you something, and you have received it. And as long as you have received what they gave you and thanked them for it, then that transaction, as it were, is complete.
Yeah.
Okay. So they wanted to give it to you and they gave it to you and you accepted it and you said thank you. So now that transaction is complete. And you have to believe also that most people, we know that this is not all people, because there are some people who are passive aggressive or, have sort of different motivations. But most people who give you a gift want to give you something that they think will be useful to you or that will bring you joy and make you happy. If they have given you something that is not useful to you and does not bring you joy or make you happy, then passing it along to someone else who will have that benefit kind of accomplishes that goal, that overall goal of bringing more happiness into the world without it having to be you. There is,
Yeah.
I do say that if it's a person who gave it to you and they really, really expect to see whatever it is, and their feelings would be really crushed because maybe your grandmother gave you a teapot that belonged to her mother, and it could be fugly. It could be really, really bad looking. And you don't like it, and you don't drink tea, and you don't see the point in this, right? In
Yeah.
this hypothetical.
Yeah.
That is an item that you would probably want to keep anyway. Put it in a cupboard, pull it out when grandma's coming, because you don't want to crush her feelings, and there's no reason. But that's assuming that you have the space and the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would go with a white lie that, the cat knocked it over. And I wouldn't actually break it. I would just,
Gift
I
it
would
off.
release it. Yeah, I would release it to a charity shop, or regift it to somebody who might actually love it.
Mm.
That kind of a thing, because I think that that's also good karma in the world. The fact that I had an entire set of china in my old house that I got rid of, um, that's going to benefit whoever got it. And it benefited me by creating space for dishes that I actually liked.
Yeah.
So, it kind of works out that way. But it can be tricky with items that are, gifts or from somebody else who has a different agenda than you do.
Would you agree, though, that all these things that you're talking about are really energy? And so at the same time, if you're not honoring who you are and where you are, then you're almost defeating the purpose as well. you have to honor your own journey and your own truth. And if that person gets upset, that's on them too, right?
100%. I mean, I prefer, like, when I moved, I had a parlor grand piano, which had come into our family, which my father had stripped and refinished. It was from between the wars, between World War I and World War II. It was a beautiful instrument with a gorgeous sound.
Wow.
And there was no room for it when I moved.
Right.
So I straight up told my parents, I'm not going to move this with me. I need to get rid of it. Did you want it? And they said no. And I called my brother and I said, okay, I'm not going to move this with me. Do you want it? No. So I got rid of it at that point because and that's one of the other things. If it's a family heirloom of some sort, then offering it back to the person who gave it to you, or offering it to other members of the family, and if nobody wants it, then what kind of heirloom, you know what I'm saying? Like that at that
Yeah.
point. And that definitely happened. That happened with pieces of art that I had from my father's side. It happened with some items I had from my mother's side where I was just like, hey, does anybody want this? And they're all like, nope.
Yeah. So why should you bear the brunt of that? You
So
know, some,
yeah, why do I have to carry the weight of this,
yeah.
the literal physical weight and also the emotional weight of this baggage that I never asked for?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I've been in situations before where I've been given things and then I just outgrew them. My taste changed. And you know, I offered them back to the person, you know, thank you so much for this. I don't have
I
space in my
enjoyed it so
new,
much.
yeah, I don't have space in my new house for this. Are you happy for me to give it back or can I gift it on to someone else? And yeah, I guess it might be difficult if it's a teapot and it's not a
Well,
piano, but
no, actually, I think it's fine even with a teapot or something like that. I mean, the real issue is for that, like, one. There's only usually one or two people in our lives that have that level of where we really care that much about not upsetting them, and it's just not worth trying to deal with. Like, those are the harder ones. In
yeah.
which case, like, I generally recommend, if you have the space, just keep the thing, but
Hmm.
you
But that
you
goes
don't
back to
have
what you're
value,
saying.
but only if you have the space.
You develop your muscle. You don't start with the teapot, you end with the
No,
teapot. You do everything else.
absolutely.
And then you're in the groove and you're like, I feel the effects of not having all this shit in my life that I am able to put it through my
Exactly.
filter. Now I feel strong. I can get rid of the teapot.
I can get rid of the teapot. I
Yeah.
know that I can, like, my options are, I can call them back and say, hey, thank you. I've enjoyed having it. I've decided to go a different direction with my lifestyle, with my decorations, with my whatever it happens to be. It no longer really works for me and fits in here. Would you like it back? Can I give it to someone else? Right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, because but it's interesting because you're building your decision making muscle as you go, where everything feels like it's piled on top of you. And as you develop that decision making muscle and you find that you're stepping out from behind all this stuff that has been boxing you in and keeping you stuck as this person that you're
Mm.
kind of not. And you really are reclaiming more and more of who you are, which makes it easier to say, hey, do you want this back? Is it okay if I give it to someone else?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you don't start at a place where that's a conversation that most of the time people don't start at a place where that is even a conversation they can think about having. It's
Yeah.
just completely beyond the pale. It's not going to happen. They're not going to do it because you're already so stuck you're stuck with all this stuff, but you're stuck with the opinions of other people kind of pushing in on you too.
Yeah.
And as you
Yeah.
start to develop your decision making muscle, it becomes easier to make those decisions in other areas that are not just decluttering.
Yeah,
So
I love that. So it's kind of the same policy, would you say, for people that have left or passed over, like people who have died? And because I would think that that would be a very difficult thing to work through as well, in the decluttering process, all their things that are still
to
there.
declutter, yes. In fact, um, my husband's cousins who were like about 90, died last year. And we went to help clear out their house. They had two sons, each of whom was married. And we went to help clear out the house. And we showed up the one day, and one of the sons had decided to start with a box of memorabilia from when he was a child. He was done for the day before he finished the end of that box because he was starting with sentimental and that was too hard.
Yes.
Okay. And it's definitely, they were going to take things that people wanted. They could come and get what they wanted, and then everything else was going to go into an estate sale. And I think it was really interesting. Some of the things that people didn't want would have been things that were prized by the people who died, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
like some of their like one of the pieces of furniture that they liked best was sold in the estate sale because nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
Right. And it happens all the time. And you'll see it a lot of times where, like, when my one grandmother passed, my paternal grandmother passed, she had a silver tea set that she loved and nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
Nobody uses a silver tea set anymore. This one was particularly ornate and hideous.
Right.
So like nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
And she would have been heartbroken probably to know that nobody wanted it, but it kind of doesn't matter. You still have to honor the people who are left.
Yeah.
And one of my tips, if you are a person who has to go to, like, if your parents are downsizing or they're going to move into an assisted living facility or a nursing home and you're going through their things and they're still there, I suggest taking sometimes the smaller things that have like a more meaningful attachment to you. So one of my prize possessions is this really ugly pressed glass bowl that my grandmother, I think, got at the Acme, like for free if you spend a certain amount on groceries, like back in the day.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are not talking about a high ticket item here.
Yeah.
It is a prized possession for me because every time I had a meal at her house, that bowl was used. It was used for pudding, jello, applesauce, slivered cucumber salad. Like, it was used constantly. And so I have a lot of memories of making food and eating food with her. And that bowl was always in service. So it has huge value to me, even though it was, I think, probably free.
Yeah, I love that because it goes with the abundance mindset in the sense that there's enough to go around and there's something for everybody. And I think that, when you go back to what you were talking about, how things weigh you down physically and emotionally, once you start to clear away, it's just stuff. It's not a representation of your soul or your heart or who you are as a person. And do you think that sometimes in society, especially nowadays where everyone's trying to keep up with the Joneses and we've got social media that's telling us that we need all this stuff, that it's actually distracting us from our values, our beautiful voices? It's masking our ability to be bigger than we are, and it's keeping us down.
Oh, definitely. And it does mask our ability to be who we were meant to be, because what happens is if you start to chase the stuff, the trappings, whatever it happens to be, you're numbing out sort of your own inner voice. Like you're dampening it down, I guess is what I should say. Is like, because if you are worried about having certain items or having enough stuff or having the fancy, car, or making sure that, you've upgraded all your kitchen to, marble countertops or granite countertops and all this other stuff. If it's not because they make you happy, but it's just for show for other people, it's you don't really have a connection to that. And so now you are disconnected in a way from the things in your home, but they are there and they have energetic weight to them. And so it's in a way almost like, especially if you're not connected to it, you don't care for it, but you did it anyway, you're running into that sort of disconnect and that dissonance on a daily basis. So like if you went ahead and you put in whatever it happens to be in your house because you wanted it to look a certain way because that's what you were told or because somebody else talked you into it, but it doesn't feel good to you, then you're kind of in conflict with your surroundings. And that's what happens when you have too much stuff, is the
Yeah.
stuff. First of all, everything is energy. We were talking about energy a little earlier, but everything is
Yeah.
energy, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a magazine, if it's a lamp, if it's a piece of furniture, piece of clothing, whatever it is, it's all made out of energy as you drill down, right?
Yeah.
It looks solid, but the more you look and the more you look, you find it's all made of atoms, and that's all energy, and it all has energy, like literally. And some of it can attach to you in different ways. So like if you have a negative association with something and you're keeping it in your space, that's constantly pulling you in a negative direction. And it's the same
Mm.
thing where if you have too much stuff in your space, it is actually weighing things down. And it's why, like, if you've ever done anything with feng shui, because I'm a fan. I'm
Yeah.
not a like licensed practitioner or anything, but I do try to
Yeah.
implement in my house. But if you have a whole bunch of stuff piled on your floor, that's literally pulling heaviness and weight down in your room. It's pulling the energy down. And that's not going to make you feel very happy. Like you want to get it all moving again. And so if you were to clear that stuff out and free up that space, now all of a sudden you can have better circulation. Whether you think of it as circulation of air or circulation of light or circulation of energy, it's all really the same thing. You know, the more freedom there is for things to move around, sort of the more likely you are to feel a little happier in the space and maybe feel a little more like you can take a deeper breath. Because if everything's closing in on you because it's all piled up, like it starts to literally make you
Yeah.
contract to the point where you feel like you can't really fill your lungs even.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that happens. So
Yeah, I think that, sometimes too, when we're constantly looking to fill up our space with things or, the marble countertops or whatever, that it's actually, it's distracting us from who we are. I know I kind of mentioned that before, but I really believe that, you know, people who do that, they start equating their value with the things around them. And when those things go away, it's almost as though a representation or a part of themselves has left as well. And so it's almost as though, when you were talking about the very beginning of our conversation, when you're decluttering, you get to the other stuff, the important things, like your belief systems, and recognizing that, your value is tied up in these thoughts from your childhood that are no longer true. And it's when you're creating this space to be able to work through that stuff, that's when you would start to see a lot of the transformation happen, right?
100%. And
Yeah.
as I said, like, I think that you can come at this type of work from lots of different angles, right? You can start almost anywhere. I just think that decluttering is a great place to start from, because it's something physical, especially if you're
Yeah.
doing stuff. It's something physical that you can do.
Yeah.
So you can see the results of it.
Yeah.
But the important part isn't even what you're seeing. It's how you're feeling. And
Yeah.
you're literally lifting weight off of yourself. And I mean, there's studies that show that you could be literally lifting weight off of your body, because there's a lot of studies
Yeah.
that show that if you are living in a lot of clutter, you're a lot of times you're holding some extra weight in your body. And that just by decluttering your space, a lot of times, because that lowers your stress in a lot of ways, it releases some of that extra weight, and people find it that way. That I don't
Yeah.
recommend decluttering as a weight loss system. Don't get
No,
me
but
wrong,
yeah,
but it
no,
definitely
no.
does have that as a side benefit.
Yeah, yeah,
Because now all of a sudden you have space to move, and you're starting to feel more like yourself, and you're realizing, oh,
yeah,
right, like I'm not the person who wears, like yoga pants and a t-shirt 24/7, right?
yeah,
Maybe that's not who I like, that's who I was when I was, 20, but now that I'm 30, like maybe that's not really who I am anymore, or
yeah,
I'm not the mom who wears there's a couple of them in my neighborhood that I see walking. They're always wearing bike shorts and an oversized t-shirt. And I'm like, okay, so that's the uniform for moms in my neighborhood apparently, but like
yeah,
I don't identify with that. Like that's not okay. I'm like, no, I'm the mom who wears like the flowy dress,
yeah,
or because you
yeah,
put it on and you're done. Um
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the success stories you've had with clients, because I am interested in knowing, whether or not you've had people that really just couldn't do this on their own, and once they finally did, that transformation.
So what I found is, most people can do some level of decluttering themselves. A lot of times it's surface stuff. So like you can read an article that says something like, oh, go back through your wardrobe and get rid of like anything that you haven't worn in the last 6 months. First of all, I don't like hard and fast rules. So I don't have any rules like that particularly in my program,
Yeah.
because
Everyone's
one size
different.
doesn't one size doesn't fit all. And the thing is like, there can be reasons, and they can be valid.
Yeah.
So anything that's really facile like that doesn't necessarily work, but most people have done some version of it, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go through, like for right now, you might be like, okay, I'm going to go back through my summer stuff, and anything that I didn't wear this past year, I'll at least put that aside and decide whether or not I want to get rid of it, because it's, I didn't use it last summer. So why should I keep it around till next summer? Right? Because it's the off season for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Same thing here with winter clothes. So you might do something like that. And so a lot of the people that I've worked with have done that kind of a thing, or they have made some decisions on like what to pare down, um, but usually only in certain areas. So like they decided that they were going to set up a home office, so they decluttered a bedroom, just one room, to try to make space to kind of make it work,
Yeah.
right? um but they haven't tackled their entire home.
Yeah. The
um
holistic, the whole picture.
the
Yeah.
holistic picture is still like way out of whack.
Yeah.
And so they'll be like, well, I did it, and I got rid of, a dresser and whatever, so that I could make this office, and I still am not really happy. And part of it is, okay, well, tell me about your office. This is a good example, because this was one of my clients. Tell me about your office. Well, I had an old I have one of those old tables, the plastic ones with the metal legs. That's my desk. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, tell me some more. Well, and I have a folding chair, and I put my computer on the top of the table, and I have my folding chair, and I have, whatever. And it it wasn't feeling right to them in this instance, because they had claimed the space, sort of, in that they had gotten rid of the other things, but they hadn't actually claimed it as an office. They had just sort of thrown a table and chair in there
Right.
to call it an office.
Yeah.
And so it turned out that we were able to work with that, because you could work with what's there. She did replace the chair. She added a drawer unit that she had someplace else in the house to like make it more desk like.
Yeah.
because it was an expense issue. But also she realized that she could declutter some of the other things she had. So what she was doing is she was going to declutter some of that and sell it. So now she was going to release that stuff out of her house,
Yeah.
receive abundance in the form of hard, cold cash from her
Yeah.
sale,
Yeah.
and use that cash that from that energetic exchange and exchange that for the actual desk that she wanted, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't usually go through like how to redo a room. It's all about decluttering. But in this particular instance, like what she had done before she started to work with me, that's where she was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were able to identify that, well, that's, that's not the same thing as honoring her. She was willing to kind of claim some space, but it was very tentative, and she wasn't really willing to step up and step in and own that space for herself because she didn't feel worthy of it, is what it came down to.
Right.
As we worked through the process. So
It sounds like it was sort of temporary, things that she could easily fold up and put away.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so we made it a little more stable while she was doing the rest of the house. But then when she was able to sell some things,
Yeah.
she could then do it that way. And
Yeah.
you know, whether you want to sell things or you don't want to sell things, that's a whole conversation also, by the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because because there's a lot of time and effort and energy that goes into it if you want to sell things. And so if you are just as happy to release them, knowing that by doing so you have, sent good karma out into the world, then
Yeah.
that's good too. I mean, that's, you know,
Yeah, agreed. So that's kind of going back to, the abundance topic, which is what I wanted to end on today. So, when you're giving things away as well, it does give you an opportunity to really just get rid of it. I mean, some people will hold on to things for ages, and it's just doing, the opposite that they were trying to do the whole time because they're trying to get $5, right? So do you kind of believe that, when you give, you receive, and it kind of is the whole, I almost want to say the circle of life, but it's not. But at the same time, it's about that flow, right?
yeah, it's an energetic flow. It's an
Yeah.
energetic exchange. And
Yeah.
so for me, when going back to that piano that I was talking about, um, it was logically probably worth about 20 grand. I gave it away to a man who hired movers to come and pick it up and take it. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted it to go to somebody who was going to value it. This is a guy who absolutely fell in love with the instrument. And, I really didn't want to have to spend my time and effort trying to find a buyer. And I didn't want 1,000 people traipsing in and out of my house to look at the piano and everything else. So
Yeah.
this all fell together in a way that felt very good to me. And I know because I have heard from him how much he loves the instrument and treasures it and is using it and is keeping it in good repair. And so for me, the positive energy of that, of doing something, because that piano cost us nothing for my family. It's not like we were out that money. It just came
Yeah.
into the family, got, fixed up. And I was just like, well, then it can go back out
Yeah.
and pay it forward that way.
Yeah.
And, I had years and years of enjoyment playing that instrument.
Yeah.
And so it was really nice to be able to release it, knowing that it was going to be loved. And so sometimes there's that. Sometimes I think if you're, cleaning out your closet and you're taking a couple bags of stuff to Goodwill or to another charity shop or something like that, and you're just releasing that stuff,
Yeah.
you've now made space for things that you like or that fit you better, whatever it happens to be, or you've just made space for the things that you have to have space and everything's not jammed. There's value in that, right? So
Yeah.
you've released that, and somebody else is going to take great joy in that, because the people who go to thrift shops and snap that stuff up are just so happy, you know Whether they shop at a thrift shop for the thrill of the hunt or for any other reason, like people are thrilled with what they get. And
Yeah.
so that putting that out there and being somebody who has created that kind of, positivity in the world is valuable. It has value. And also because you've done that, you've put some good out. So, the way the world works, you've put good out. What's coming back?
Good.
Nothing but good.
Yeah, it's true. And abundance doesn't need to be expensive, right? Because like you're talking about, if we go back to your grandma's bowl,
Oh, yeah.
that was a free bowl, but it's giving you a lot of happiness and joy and great memories. And so, abundance is just about, having more of what you want that fills you up and makes you feel good. And it can be space, it can be light, it can be laughter, and it doesn't just have to be things,
100%.
Yeah.
And I would say that if you're living a truly abundant life, even if you're living an abundant life that includes wealth, okay, because there's no shame in that either.
Yeah.
But if you are living a truly abundant life, if you're only living it in one confined area, then you're not really embracing the concept of abundance, because abundance means, sort of everything, right? It's all the things. It's very full. And
Yeah.
so it's really the fullness of life that you're going for.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Gave me goosebumps. That's beautiful. Kelly, thank you so much. We're already up to our hour, believe it or not. Kelly, I understand you also have a free download of an energy clearing PDF, which will help our listeners, with decluttering and getting stagnant energy moving inside their home. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And then I understand as well that when the episode goes live for a month, people have a chance to, take advantage of your ebooks for 10% off if they use raw promo code at the checkout. And I'll put all the details of that in the show notes as well.
Yep. Terrific.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I love the work that you're doing. I loved our conversation today. And, I think my biggest takeaway as well was, that it's just really important to honor where you are at and listen to what is right for you.
100% agree. That is exactly it.
Great. So if people wanted to talk to you about coaching as well and finding out more about your courses, I'll put a link to all your information in the show notes. You'd be happy to have that discussion?
Absolutely. I am happy to get in touch. If you shoot me an email, I'm happy to book like a free 30-minute call just to touch base and see what's up.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you. It was great having you. Or actually, sorry. It was great being here.
It was great having you. There we go. Love. Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please do leave us a review where you listen to your podcast and share it with your friends. New episodes every Monday.